Harry would swing from the other side of the building to catch Shocker off guard, and Harry would scream Shocker, and he would turn around, and he would meet his face with his fist, and he would be sent flying into the air. Shocker would try using his gloves, but Spider-Man would use the symbiote whip, and Harry would be laughing, loving the power. He would crush his hands, and Spider-Man would use his webs, grabbing Shocker, and he would knock him out, finishing the job. People would be cheering on the streets for Spider-Man, and the cops could be heard in the distance. He thought, not this time. He won't let Shocker break out again and do all this cycle all over again. And Eddie Brock would be on the streets, and he would see Spider-Man. He would pull out his phone, and he would start taking a video of Spider-Man beating the life out of Shocker, and Harry would strangle him, breaking his collarbone, and he would send him flying into the ground. Spider-Man would swing away, thinking to himself that this is the last time he's going to be facing Shocker. He would swing to the police station, and he would morph back into his Harry Osborn clothes. He would start walking down the street looking at the police station. He would be greeted by Gwen Stacy, and he would be shocked seeing her. He would be nervous, and he would say hi, asking if he could talk to Captain Stacy, and she would smile, telling him she would get him out. Captain Stacy would walk with Gwen, and they would be interrupted by Eddie Brock. He would come running in to Gwen, asking how their date went, and Harry would look at Eddie. Eddie would give him a bad look, and Harry would smile, remembering what he did to him, and Gwen would smile, walking away from Harry. Harry would shake Captain Stacy's hand, and he would ask why he's here. Harry would tell him that he's here to see facts about the Ben Parker case, and Captain Stacy would tell him he couldn't see it unless he was one of the family members, or if one of the family members were with him. Harry would convince him, telling him that Peter Parker had died and that his aunt just wants closure with the case, and he would agree. They would walk into a room and they would sit down. Harry would be given documents about the case, and he would open the files, looking at everything. He would look at the info, getting flashbacks of that fateful night, and Captain Stacy would say it was reported that during the night of the shooting, a man let the robber go, but they figured out that the two people didn't kill Ben Parker. It was revealed that it had been Flint Marko that did it. Harry would have flashbacks of him letting the robber go, and he knew how could he screw this up badly. He went after the wrong killer, and the man that killed Peter's uncle was still alive. Harry would stand up yelling at Captain Stacy, telling him why didn't he tell the family about this, and Captain Stacy would tell Harry to calm down, and Captain Stacy would take the files from Harry, telling him it was time for him to leave. He would stand up demanding to know where Flint was, and he would say that it wasn't any of his business. Harry at this point would go to his breaking point, and he would throw the table in the room towards a wall, and he would storm out of the police station. Eddie Brock would be laughing outside of the station, and Harry would tell him what his problem was. Eddie would tell him to leave him and Gwen alone, and Harry would say he was going to put some dirt in his eye. Harry would uppercut Eddie, and Gwen would yell at him. He would start laughing, and Harry would leave the area. Echoes of screams would be heard, and electricity would blow up. It would be Peter, and he would be on the ground shaking. He would crawl, trying to get to his feet. He was weak and needed more energy. He would see that he was at the old warehouse where him and Og first did their experiment. He would crawl up, putting his hands into the broken down machine, the same machine that blew him up for the first time. He would get a ton of amounts of energy, and he would smile. Peter would get back up, looking at his hands getting regenerated, and he knew round 2 was coming, but he had to regroup. His hands and everything would regenerate, and he would hear voices in his head. A battle for control. It was Norman's voice and Uncle Ben's. Peter would have tears in his eyes, and they would drop on the ground, zapping the ground. He wanted to return to normal. He wanted to see his aunt and MJ, but he knew he could never do that. They would never accept him back for who he was or what he was at this point. He knew that he had to take revenge fast, but he thought to himself, how did Harry turn into that monster? Peter would have PTSD from the monster, and he thought, how could he beat him? Would it be possible? And he would smile, knowing that he was going to go for round 2. Harry would swing home, and he would open the door. He would say hello, and there would be an echo in the room. He could see burn marks everywhere, and he would be shocked, running, looking around. The place was raided and destroyed. He would shout Bernard's name, but there would be no answer. Harry would see the glass to the trap door, and it was broken. He would walk further into the room, seeing writing on the wall. It would say round 2, and Harry would look to see the lights flicker in the room, and the goblin suits were gone, or at least 2 of them. Gliders in the room would turn on, and Norman's old glider would shoot spikes in the air and it would overload. Harry's spider sense would go off and he would do a backflip and it would shoot into the wall. Harry knew he couldn't believe it. It's just not possible. The TV would crackle and it would have a breaking news story saying Shocker had escaped prison and the police station was broken into. Harry knew who was there and he couldn't let them escape. It was time for his revenge and he thought if Peter is still alive, he would come back for him after this and after he has the full proof that he didn't kill his Uncle Ben. Harry knew that if Ben Parker's documents were somehow destroyed, it would be all over and he couldn't save Peter from himself or his family. He thought maybe this would kick some sense into Peter and maybe he would forgive him for everything that he did. He had to try somehow. Harry would run diving out of the house and he would swing to the station. It was on fire and inmates were breaking out of their cells and Captain Stacy would try holding the line, but Shocker's sonic blast would make him go flying to the ground. Captain Stacy would be knocked out and Spider-Man would swing in and he would see Shocker. Shocker would use a sonic blast and Harry would scream in pain. The symbiote would be moving and tendrils would be everywhere. The tendrils would pick up thugs, throwing them at Shocker, and he would shock them all in the air. Spider-Man would use his webs and they would go on Shocker, but he would use 4 massive blasts and Spider-Man would fall to the ground. Shocker would pick him up by his shoulder, getting ready to finish the job, but lightning would be heard and it would go through Shocker. He would scream in pain. Peter would phase into Electro form with another goblin suit, making his powers more stable. He would have a flashback of him smashing his face off of the bus and he knew it was Shocker's fault. He would tell Shocker he's going to remember this shocking event for a very long time and he would use 10 lightning bolts, but Harry would say no, jumping in front of the bolts being electrocuted. Peter would laugh, telling Spider-Man that he should have left Shocker to die, and Peter would teleport, melting a hole through Shocker's skull and he would drop on the ground dead. Harry would crawl up, getting to his feet, and there would be a standoff. Harry would tell Peter he could help him. He could do anything. He would tell Peter that he knows who really killed his uncle and he was in this prison. An explosion would go off and they would both look at the inmates. Flint would run through the fire, getting to the front entrance of the station, and he could see this was his chance to finally get revenge for Spider-Man. He knew that he was going to do this for his daughter. Flint Marko would see Shocker's dead body and he would take the gloves off of him, telling him that he was a waste. He would look around and he would use the gloves and cops would go flying. He would run in, seeing Spider-Man beating up thugs, and Harry would yell at Peter, telling him the documents were there. They would go into the room getting the file. He would try giving it to Peter, but he would be hit to the ground with a massive shockwave of sonic blasts. It was Flint Marko. Harry would scream in pain and Flint would yell, saying these ones were for Penny, and Harry would try dodging an attack. He would drop the files on the ground, but a sonic blast would go smashing into him. He would scream and the symbiote would launch off of him. Peter would be shocked seeing the symbiote go off of him. He didn't know what it was or what to do. The symbiote would go onto Flint and he would start screaming for help. Harry would be down for the count and Peter knew he had to trust his friend just for one time. He would walk towards Flint in anger and he would yell, saying this was for his Uncle Ben, but Flint would use a sonic blast and they would create a massive shockwave and Peter would fall to the ground sparking in pain. Flint would be consumed by the suit and he would look at his hands. He would walk towards Spider-Man, but he would see flashes of Harry's memories where he killed his friend Dennis Carradine. He would see the wrestling match, him bit by the spider. Harry would see his father dead and Flint would see Harry trying to save his daughter, but he failed. He would be confused, but the symbiote would show Flint Harry's memories and he could see MJ and he would smile. He knew he was going to take everything away from him. He would walk up to Harry, about to finish the job off, but a shotgun shell would go off, shooting Flint, and the symbiote would turn around. Captain Stacy would shoot another round off, but Flint would use his webs and stab Captain Stacy in the gut. He would fall to the ground. He would see his daughter Gwen, and she would start running and screaming for her dad. Eddie would run in with a pipe, thinking it was the same monster that beat him a few days ago, but Flint would leap in the air, grabbing Gwen, and he would kick Eddie to the ground. Harry would slowly get up, but he just couldn't. It would be too much pain. Peter would be looking at the files, and he would destroy them, finally learning the truth. He would extend his hand, and Harry would take it, and they both would smile. Peter would tell Harry he can control his energy, so touching people won't hurt him, and Harry would say to Peter, "What made you change your mind?" And he would look at Harry, saying, "It was you. You did everything for me. Let me have a job, these powers, letting me get with MJ." And he would explain that he lost sight of everything, but now he can see, and with these gifts, he would do what Uncle Ben would want him to do. He would use the powers for good. And Harry would ask if Bernard was okay, and Peter would tell him he was fine, and Harry would tell Peter they needed to find Flint. He has whatever was on me, and Peter would ask if the suit was alive, and Harry would say he wasn't sure. Harry would say sorry, and he would explain he wanted MJ, and that he was jealous during the wrestling match, and that the guy didn't pay him, so he thought that he would give him a taste of his own medicine and let the robber go. Harry would tell Peter that he wishes he could take it back and stop the guy, and Peter would have tears in his eyes and he would say, "I forgive you." Harry would look straight and Captain Stacy was on the ground. Harry would tell Peter to follow him and they would run to Captain Stacy. Captain Stacy would say, "They got my Gwen," and he would say, "Please save her," and then he would die in Harry's arms. Harry would tell Peter they had to leave quickly. They would move fast and Harry and Peter would go to the Osborn residence home and Bernard was gone. Harry would tell Peter Flint has him. Peter would explain to Harry that the suit reacts to sonic blasts and that's why the suit unbonded with you. He would come up with a plan telling Harry that they had to stop him and get the suit off before anyone else gets hurt. Harry would tell Peter they gotta see if MJ is okay. A breaking news story would be heard and Harry would turn the TV volume up. They would say that there were 4 people in 4 different cars. There would be writing on the walls telling Spider-Man to come face him one-on-one. The camera would pan and it would be Bernard, MJ, Gwen, and Aunt May would be in the cars tied up with symbiote webs. Harry would be shocked telling Peter what does he do? Peter would get mad knowing that he had to save his aunt and he would tell Harry he would be behind him at all times, but he would let him fight Flint one-on-one and then he would catch Flint off surprise. Harry would explain that he needs to save all of them because Peter's powers, he couldn't touch them for long since they were regular people. They wouldn't be able to handle the electricity. Harry would swing out of the building diving. He knew that this was it. He had to stop Peter's uncle's killer, putting an end to this once and for all. Peter would phase near Harry following him. Crowds of people would be at a construction site like the original timeline, but this time it's only Venom. Harry would swing in and people would start cheering Spider-Man. Harry would swing on top of the construction site looking around. He would try opening the door to get Bernard out, but he would start shouting, telling Harry to look out. Venom would appear from behind, slamming Harry into the car. The glass would shatter and Harry would kick Venom off of him. Venom would do a backflip landing on the other car that MJ was in. His face would show tendrils and it was Flint Marko. He would tell Harry that he was going to kill everyone here. Harry would ask why is he doing this and he would explain that night of the fire he let his daughter burn to death in the building, not saving her. Harry would have a flashback in his head knowing it was true. He would say to Flint that he wanted to save her and he tried everything he could and that he was truly sorry. He would explain, look within the symbiote, you know it's true, Flint, and Venom would scream. He would rip the car door open and MJ would start screaming. He would take her by the neck and Peter would see this happening. He would finally step in. He would scream using bolts of lightning and he would shock Venom and Venom would scream in pain. He would say, you're not going to kill any more people. He would say, remember Ben Parker, the man that you killed in cold blood, and Venom would say to him why it matters to him and he would scream saying that it was his uncle. He would shock Venom but he would dodge the attacks and lightning would hit Spider-Man. He would go on the ground falling towards the webs and MJ was just hanging on for her life. Venom would use a web ball and Harry's hands would be tied up. He would try breaking free but it would be too late. Venom would slash Harry's mask off and he would cut him all the way down his face. Peter would teleport in saving MJ. He would do it quickly, dropping her off safe. Peter would run back into the fight and he would spear Venom off of the construction site. Peter would take him by the neck, electrocuting him. Peter would say to Venom he was going to experience a lot of pain, everything that he lost, and he would drop Venom and Venom would go flying, falling to the ground. Peter would use bolts of lightning and they would go into Venom's chest. Venom would be hit to the ground, almost being knocked out. Harry would break free and he would swing to the cars. He would let Aunt May go, ripping the car door off, and he would put her down near MJ. She could see Harry's face within the mask and she would have a tear in her eye. Harry would swing, saving Gwen and Bernard. Bernard would say, I owe you one, sir, and he would say, no you don't, and they would embrace and they would hug. He would swing down below and Venom would be getting up, leaping in the air. He would see an electrical outlet and Peter would charge at Venom, but he would do a front flip, tripping him, and he would smash his face off of the breaker and he would start turning yellow. Peter would blow up and Harry would see this. Harry would scream Peter's name and Harry would be electrocuted, going flying into a wall, and he would hit his back off of a pillar and it would break. Flint would see this and that this was his opportunity, and he would use his webs, grabbing a cinder block, smashing it into Harry's face. He would punch him again and again. Venom would claw the other side of Harry's face, and Venom would chokeslam Harry into the ground. He would use his webs, latching the symbiote onto Harry's neck, and Venom would see a sharp broken blade and he would use his webs, picking it up. He would stab it into Harry's shoulder and he would scream. He would try to move, but Venom would dig his claws into Harry's left leg. Harry would almost be knocked out, but he would use the rest of his powers to break free, doing a front flip. He would tie his webs around Flint's neck and he would use 2 other webs and they would connect it to the ground. A distorted voice would be heard and it was Peter. He was glowing yellow. He would shock Venom and Venom would scream in pain. Harry would use his webs and they would pull in time and he would rip the symbiote off. Marko would be screaming and Peter would tell Harry to look out, and he would destroy the symbiote using a massive bolt and an explosion would go off. Flint would crawl trying to get to his feet, but Peter and Harry would be standing tall. Harry would turn around looking at the crowd of people, and they could see half of his burned face. He would look at Peter, and Peter would tell him he wanted to kill him right here and right now, but he wouldn't. Flint would explain what happened and how they needed the money for his daughter, and he would say that his daughter was the only thing left to him, but now he has nothing. And Peter would look at him, and he would forgive Flint for killing his uncle, and he would cry. Peter would tell Harry that he had to leave now, and that he had to figure things out, and he would learn more about his powers. Peter would phase out, fading away, and Harry would say, "Goodbye, old friend," and Harry would tell Flint that he would try to help him, and he would extend his hand. He would shake his hand, and he would explain to him he would talk to him soon. Flint would say the suit took him over, and that he didn't want any of this to happen, but it did happen. Harry would tell Flint that he did horrible things too, but now it's finally destroyed. He would say goodbye, and Harry would do one final swing, going back to the Osborn residence house. Bernard would welcome him back, and Harry would smile, and they would shake hands. Bernard would put his hand on him, and he would say, "It's all over now, and that I'm proud of you, son." Peter would figure out how to reform himself back to normal while still keeping his powers. He would do many tests on himself, and Harry would fund it using Oscorp money. Peter would go back home, and Aunt May and MJ would be so happy to see Peter. They would figure out about his powers, and Aunt May would remind Peter to use them like how Uncle Ben would want you to use them. And Harry would still continue to be Spider-Man, and he would apologize to MJ and Aunt May about everything that happened, and they would forgive Harry Osborn. Harry would get a new operations room in the Osborn residence house, and they would fix it all up. They would have all of his past suits in glass containers, and Bernard would walk up to Harry. He would say there was an alert happening, major energy spikes, sir. Harry would demand, wanting to know where it was coming from, and he would say that it was from the downtown area. Harry would put his classic gray and black Alex Ross suit on, telling Bernard that he was going to check it out and see what was wrong. Bernard would say, "Sir, don't get killed again," and Harry would laugh, jumping out of the building. Helicopters would follow him in the air, and it would be Peter. Harry would make it in time, swinging down towards him. Harry would yell at Peter, telling him what was wrong, and Peter would say that he was drawn towards the site. It had so much energy. There is so much out of the blue. Peter would look at his hands, and he could see that they were going everywhere, and he didn't know what to do. There would be an energy explosion, and Harry's spider sense would go off, and Harry would grab Peter in time. They would roll over, and they would look around to see a portal. Harry would be confused looking at it, and he didn't know what to do. Harry would try phoning Bernard through a link on his mask, telling him what was going on. Harry would ask Peter, try shutting it down, and Peter would try using his powers, but a hand would come out of the portal, and it would be Moreland. He would grab Peter by the neck, and he would start screaming in pain, begging for help. Harry would quickly run in, swinging, and he would try kicking Moreland, but he would dodge the attack, choke slamming Harry to the ground. He would pick up Harry, explaining that he was hungry for another Spider-Man, but out of nowhere, another portal would open, and it would be the original Spider-Man in red and blue. Harry would be confused, and out would come the Spider-Man. The original Sam Raimi Spider-Man would kick Moreland in the face, and he would help Harry up. Harry would say, "Who are you?" and he would look around and stop. He would say Peter in confusion, and Peter would say Harry in confusion, and they would look at Moreland. They would be ready to fight, and that's going to be What If Harry Osborn Got Bit by the Spider, the official saga. That's where we're going to end it. I really can't even believe the amount of support that I got with this series. It was completely crazy. Part 1 to 4 was like insane. I can't even believe it. Like, I'm so happy that you guys enjoyed this series, and I thought that we would end it on a high note with the Spider-Verse and Moreland, you know, coming into Harry's universe. Maybe this will tie into something else in the future. But if you guys did enjoy this video and want to stay all up to date with the latest content, do make sure to subscribe, like, share, and turn your notifications on so you and your friends are all up to date with the latest content. And I do want to say, we're going to be doing What If Mary Jane Was Bit by the Spider for the next saga, and we might do a couple other ones. But anyways, thanks for tuning in, guys. I highly appreciate it. But anyways, peace out.